Hello, everyone. Lawrence Temple here again from there to here. Our podcast where we talk to people about their journeys, literally how they got from where they were to where they are and to what's ahead. And a few times I've had a chance to interview someone more than once, and this is one of those times. This is Mr. Derrick Collins. We spoke, I don't know, about a year ago or maybe or more.
Feel like it's been a more. It's been a few more.
It's been a while. I'm not quite sure how long it's been. Too
Right,
long for one.
for sure.
um, about, and we spoke about his nonprofit, things he does with young people. And we're going to kind of have a part two about that today, about his insights with young people, the things he's doing, and all things related. So, Mr. Collins, how are you?
I'm good. It's been a like I said, it's been a day, but I'm here. I'm
Good.
here. I'm present.
For those who weren't here before, I think before I asked you to give me your elevator speech, like boiling down what you're about in a few moments. Could you do that for people who are unaware of who you are?
Um, well, it has evolved over the years, as most things do. Um, of course, I'm still a mental health therapist. I'm still a mentor at large. But to be honest, I feel like I've moved more towards that community connector piece. I've moved more towards entrepreneurship, more ways to be able to give our kids avenues, to kind of be successful. After doing therapy for so long, you see, that there's limits to that. Just like as you know, as a teacher, there's limits to what you can kind of do as a teacher.
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of why I've evolved now because my, kids that were young are now older now. And, so now I think a little bit differently of how I can really affect them. So, I feel like I'm more of a community connector. I'm more of a youth development program, not just a one-on-one, therapist, so that's kind of what we've changed and evolved into.
Got it. I want to ask you about that community piece here in just a second. Something else revisiting, I think, from when we spoke before, a question that maybe someone who's not around kids would ask. If someone knew that you work with kids and they said, "Hey, from your experience, what is it that our kids need?" That's a super general question, but someone who
Right.
doesn't know kids would ask that. What would your stock answer, I guess, be to
Well, I
something
got
like
a
that?
simple answer for you. They need some hope. They need hope that things can be okay. They need some kind of light at the end of the light at the end of the tunnel because right now they're lost. And I know you're a teacher, so I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like the edu- the, the education that we're putting them in front to and making them go to classes and making them do those things, they don't see the value in it. That's why a lot of kids are skipping and not wanting, dropping out early and not really
Hmm.
seeing the importance of school. Not that it's not important, but I feel like the school in itself needs to evolve a little bit about what we're actually teaching them, how we are really preparing them because they're with us for 12 years, their first early parts of their years. And I feel like we
Yeah.
have to better prepare them for the real world.
I can completely see that. Even as a person within the system, I completely see the need for more real world connections. And I hear some of that, particularly from my older students, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. I see that completely. Um, how about, again, I'm revisiting a couple of things I asked you before, but it's so pertinent. I wanted to get it on this one too. I've encountered people that have an interest in helping the youth, but they feel that, or they assume that since they didn't have a, using their word, they didn't have a rough life. So I want to help these kids, but I probably couldn't connect with them because I'm not from where they're from. So I want to help, but I guess I wouldn't be able to because my background's different than theirs. What would your words be to someone who was thinking like that?
I don't know what my answer was before, but nowadays it's excuses.
Mm,
You got there's plenty of kids that haven't had bad lives. They just are in crappy situations.
good
They have
point.
one mom. That doesn't mean they have a bad life because they have one mom. They might
Yeah.
be limited on, funds and stuff like that, but that doesn't mean everybody's not a criminal. Everybody isn't a, gangbanger. Everybody
Yes.
isn't a, trying to fight you all the time. A lot of times that's far from the case, and they just really need somebody to be there for them. And I feel like if you show that genuine passion and that genuine, that you really are there for them. That's really all they're looking for right now.
No, I'm glad you worded it that way because I think people who don't work with kids, that's their assumption that any kid that needs to be worked with is from extreme poverty or criminal justice, all that kind of stuff. And they don't think of a quote unquote regular kid who still needs help. So I'm glad you worded it that way.
And like I said, I'm sorry that I guess when you've been doing it a long time and you've been, seeing the need, and then you're seeing people that, can provide that void, but they choose not to, and they give those kind of excuses of why they don't. I guess I look at it a little bit different. Even the people that do need help, I have parents that it's like they ask for help, but then they don't bring them to the events, or they,
Ah,
got all these excuses. So now, I look at things a little bit differently now.
I got, well, I guess it's kind of my next question. You kind of alluded to that. How has your approach or how you see what you do, how has that changed over time,
Um,
if it has?
it's changed and evolved, and of course, it's still youth. My numbness to, the excuses are a little bit, straightforward now.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I kind of let parents know what the real issues are without having to like dance around it
Okay.
as much. Of course, I'm still a therapist, so I know how to kind of say it therapeutically or professionally, but I have no problem telling the parents that, you are a major part of why they are how they are right now. Um, and I kind of do it in a way so they can see for themselves without me having to really say it. But as simple as asking them a question of, okay, he's angry, he's being disrespectful, he's doing a lot of this cursing. So do you curse? Do you get angry quickly?
Mm,
How do you respond to him when he gets into trouble or when he's doing these things? Because he's really just mirroring what he sees.
okay.
um so doing it in a professional way, but the parents are somewhat most of the problems. There are some kids that are just like, they just don't care about life. But
Okay.
in reality, there's reasons why they feel that way, or there's reasons why they're acting like that. They're not just born like that. In my eyes, of course, there's some kids that are just, there's developmental
Okay.
delays. That's different, of course. But once again, that's not their fault either. So you got to kind of know. You got to know kind of you got to be real. I'm got to be a little bit more real with them. Like on Facebook.
Yeah.
I'm big on Facebook, so when I'm posting stuff and when people say, "Oh, I need help, I need mentoring," and I get tagged so many different times,
Yeah.
those people ain't reaching out. Those people aren't calling. I'll tag them or send them. They want me to send them a message. I'm not hurting for kids. I got kids for days that I can kind of see. I got kids that I can't see because there's not enough time in the day.
Yeah.
So I'm not finna run after you because that's already telling me right there. You don't really care as much as you are saying. You just in your emotions right then and there. Um, and something must have just happened that you asking for help, but then as soon as things calm down, you're not gonna go and bring him. You're not gonna bring him to the office because that's an inconvenience. You're not gonna pay the extra money because now we have funding is lost for everybody. So
Okay.
you're not going to pay the extra dollars to get him really that help. So like I said, this is this is the voice of a giver that is now struggling.
Yep.
All of the non for profits are struggling, and seeing people give up and shut down,
Yep.
and some big time agencies. You know, and I've invested really my own personal stuff more than I really should have to make sure that we're here. And a lot of times people don't really see that side. They don't understand the real sacrifice and the real investments that we really are doing. So that's why I feel the way I feel that way, and I speak that way because it's like I ain't playing no more. I got to tell you the truth.
No, I get it. And when you talk about people get tagging you or getting tagged you or whatever, and they don't follow through. No, I've seen that with people that I've referred either to other agencies or to you or whatever, and then there's no follow up. But I do know I was at graduation. We just had graduations the other day, and I saw a kid that I hadn't seen since middle school, and it was parents. And his parents showed me, I saw a picture of him with you. So that's someone that did follow through and that you have walked through all the way through high school. So
Yeah.
I know the before and the after. So I seen the
I know
work.
exactly who you're talking about.
Yep, yep, yep. And so I've seen the when the follow through happens, I've seen the result, particularly in this young man. So I get it.
For sure. For sure.
Could you follow up a little bit more? You talked about how sometimes the parent or caregiver or whatever is actually playing a role in the problems that this child is exhibiting. Could you talk a little bit more or give maybe a few more examples of how parents are unwittingly being the problem?
Um, you know, just by their to be honest, just by their actions in general, like they they're how they respond is how the kid usually responds. How they don't follow
Mm,
through on certain things, okay, and then that kid doesn't follow through on a lot of things. He says he's gonna do something, but he doesn't.
okay.
And then I'm kind of seeing so much of the correlations, even when it comes to drugs, that's kind of like parents do that don't do as I say, not as I do.
Okay.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like you smoking weed right in front of the kid and then telling him don't smoke weed. It
Okay.
doesn't and I tried to give them a lot of times I give them my own personal experiences. Like you know, my parents didn't do any of that kind of stuff to my knowledge in front of me, at least until I was older.
Mm-hmm.
My mom didn't drink in front of me, so drinking didn't really ring a bell to me until I was older. Smoking, the same thing. I didn't,
Okay.
if they did do it, they did a good job of hiding it or
Gotcha.
keeping it from me, and so I kind of give them that correlation that when they're seeing the kids are seeing what you guys are doing, they're seeing you curse people out, they're seeing you, you know, in and out of relationships, they're
Okay.
seeing you um in and out of jobs, they're
That's
not seeing you go to college and try to improve yourself. But then we're mad when they want to do the bare minimum and don't want to go above and beyond. But we're not going above and beyond. So um, I guess like I said, it's tough when you've been doing it a long time because that
yeah.
stuff that you're sensitive about before is like I don't care. I'm gonna tell you exactly how it is. You don't like it, that's on you.
These same patterns you're seeing, I've seen, on the teaching end and the school end, either as a teacher or as an administrator. Same thing. The whole apple and the tree and all that kind of stuff. You meet the parent and the same behaviors that I'm suspending Johnny for. Mom did the same thing in the front office. So I
Right.
understand. Yeah, immediately I get that. You alluded to kind of the changes in funding and for nonprofits and things. Could you talk about how the landscape for that has changed over these last few years?
Um, and this it's across the board, to be honest. You're seeing big companies shut down. You're seeing so much of the change in power when it comes to politics and those kind of things, because 4 or 5 years ago we weren't having this issue.
Okay,
um so when the power of change comes, the his their priorities change.
okay,
So low income, Medicaid, underserved, underprivileged, those people aren't as much of a priority right now. And you're seeing how that trickles down, across agency levels, because that is our main focus is, the at-risk kids that are, low income,
okay,
you know, the funding for those specifically populations are being taken away. And it's across the board, and I'm on two county boards. I'm in places that I know where the money is at,
mm-hmm.
and across the board is being taken away, and it's kind of sad, but it's like we'll start to see how that affects us
Okay,
long term.
yeah.
Um, but right now it's kind of in that transition period, but it's a scary time.
Okay, and I'm hearing that story nationwide and from all kind of people that are in the business of helping people. I'm hearing the same thing about these pools of money drying up and the will for it drying up from those in power. I understand. For those who aren't familiar, could you talk a little bit about Mr. and Ms. Mentoring and just
Yeah.
your agency and just what you do? Because I'm kind of talking as if people are familiar with you already, but a lot of people aren't.
Right.
Please.
So like I said, we do deal with the at-risk youth. We provide mental health therapy. We provide a lot of different outlets. Like I said, there's not a lot of funding to go around to give each kid a qualified staff like I would want it to be.
Okay.
So I'm having to make transitions to give them, volunteer mentors. I'm having to, do more group stuff because I can't see everybody,
Okay.
or the people that have to pay out of pocket because it's not free anymore. A lot of our populations can't afford that, or once again, they don't see the value in that.
Okay.
Um, because like I said, it's outside of our culture. They will pay for it even if they have to struggle and work extra to do it. But
Okay.
for our people, they don't see the importance of it. Um, and so the kids, they suffer at the end of the day. They got money for their nails, they got money to drink and party every time.
I was gonna say
You
that.
know, but they don't see the value. But then they're mad when the kids are acting up and they don't understand, they don't know what to do. And it's like there is stuff you can do. You just have to make it a priority.
Okay. Mhm.
You can't have that. You might not be able to have the latest Jordans every time they come out.
Okay.
You might not be able to go shopping every other weekend and do all of the luxury stuff because that's a call to sacrifice, and they're not willing to sacrifice that. You
Okay.
know, they're not willing to go above and beyond, and that's something that I know my parents. I didn't need to go to therapy, but I was in sports from all year. I was busy. I was going to the camps. I was
Yeah.
going, you know, I was in the Orlando Science Center, summer camps. I did those
Yeah.
kind of things,
Yeah.
So that's why I feel like my kids now. I try to do a lot of, you know, exposure, exposure therapy is what I call it. We're
Yeah.
taking them different places. We're exposing them to new things, open up their brains a little bit to outside of their Daytona Beach box.
Okay.
Um,
Wow.
and then once you get outside of that box, you get to you think a little bit more. When you get out of college, you're making a certain amount. Then you get a better job. Then you think a little bit differently. Then you
Okay.
get a better job. And then it constantly grows. But if you're not striving to do better, you're not ever gonna do better. It's kind of like this hat I got right here. It says nothing changes if nothing changes.
Yeah.
So if you ain't changing nothing, ain't nothing gonna
Nothing gonna
change.
change.
And that's gonna come down from the grandma. She ain't doing it. The mom ain't doing it. The kid ain't doing it. His kid ain't gonna do it. Is somebody has to kind of something has to change, and somebody has to want to change. And I'm starting to see that. I want to deal with the kids that want help, the parents that want the help and are going to go the extra mile. I got a kid that he comes to the boxing classes, the tutoring, the the monthly events that we do.
Mm.
Um, and he's not even getting into trouble. She's just keeping him as active and as positive. And those are some of my favorite kids, versus the other ones that they're forcing them to come. And then it's like, yo, why'd you even bring him? He
Yeah.
got attitude. He don't want to be here. He complaining. It's like, no, I don't want to deal with those because that negative energy is contagious sometimes, And I like those positive leaders, people that want to be neighborhood role models and see what they're seeing.
I have my friend Larry Williams, who you met, who passed away, who had a nonprofit over in Tampa, and kind of his philosophy was similar to what you're talking about. He wanted to invest in kids who needed things, but were already at least trying to do something with their lives. So his goal was to come alongside of them and help them further in what they were already doing, not try to convince them that they should want better and then have to help them. So he was very big on seeing what the kid, helping the kid who already wanted to be something. They just didn't have the tools or the money or the resources. So I can understand a lot of what you're talking about because he used to talk about the very same thing.
Yeah. And I guess now that I'm doing it, per se, I call it for free. I haven't even paid myself in a long time because I want to make sure that the program stays afloat. And a lot of people won't do that. But at some point, givers have to kind of give back to themselves. So that's why you're seeing a lot of people saying, I'm done with this because I totally understand them, but that's also, this has been my passion for
Yeah.
10 years plus, and this is kind of all that I know, so the give up, I'm not really when it comes to stubbornness, I'm not a giver upper when it comes to that, I'm learning, I'm learning. I went on this trip recently, and I was forced to kind of separate. I was forced to kind of, you know, take myself away from everything because sometimes you don't know how much of a hole you in until you get a chance to get out of it. You're like, dang, that hole was deep.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now I'm learning that I can't see everybody. I can't want them to have all qualified, you know, therapists and people like me, and that's going to
Yeah.
be all passionate because there's not really many of them out there like that.
Okay.
Um, that I got to kind of take the help that I get, you know, offer one-on-one volunteer mentors, even though I don't like that, only because of the inconsistencies and those kind of things. Because at the end of the day, it falls back on me anyway, when they stop coming
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
they're not consistent. And now the parents calling me and complaining and saying they're not being seen. So then I have to kind of do it on my own anyway,
Okay.
but I'm relieving myself of that full responsibility. I can't do everything.
No, I'm glad you went that because I was going to go that direction and ask you how, as the head of an organization like this, how do you personally find? I'm saying the word balance. I'm sure it's probably not balance like equal, but how do you come somewhere close to balance as far as you as a person? Not so you don't get completely burned out by the weight of what you were doing, and that's a little bit what you talked about there.
And it's my passion. So sometimes, you know, if a kid is playing basketball all the time, that's his passion. So he's not going. It's not as much. His body might eventually get tired from the wear and tear, but he's not burnt out because that's what he likes to do. That's what he wants
Yeah.
to do. I could do anything. I have properties. I could do higher paying jobs and
Yeah.
do all the and work for another company and just make money, but it's not about the money for me. So that's why I'm not really rushing back to it. The dollars I've made money. It's not about that. You can't dangle that over my head like it's I give you this job, just leave the program. It's like it's not about that.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, where did this desire? Again, we might have touched on this somewhat the first time. The the vision for what you're doing now. When did that come from?
So remember how I told you about, the parents and those kind of things?
Yeah.
So my parents are, a teacher of 40 years. My dad is a therapist of 40 years, so they're retired now, but I was raised around people that were helping others, so I feel like it's just naturally from that's something that I just do, you know. So, even like my daughter, when she was being raised, sometimes she had to come with me to see a client, and she's like
Hmm.
at the park playing because I got to see a kid and stuff like that, and then she, ended up having to like help kids on her own, just naturally, So I know right now she don't want to do it because she's seeing what I'm going through, but I do feel like that's in her blood. Um, and then, like I said, this isn't just happen.
Yeah.
This is something that I was kind of when you know your purpose, and that's another thing with the whole burnt out thing is
Yeah.
when you know it's your purpose. If anything, it makes you run even harder. It makes you work even harder, especially when you know it's at the 12th hour. It's like, yo,
Yeah.
if I don't do something now, or if I give up, I know ain't nobody finna go through what I just went through to keep this, to kind of give back to the community, you
Okay.
know. So in the community right now needs us to not give up on them, just like our mayor and those kind of we can't kick everybody while they're down.
Right.
We gotta kind of support our people, and I feel like our culture in general. I'm gonna focus on our culture because other cultures don't deal with the same issues. They don't have a problem staying in the same house and it's five, six, seven of them and
Yeah.
building wealth and saving up and then moving out, and that kind of stuff. But for us, it's like we don't want to work together. We don't want to help each other out because we feel like they're gonna get the one up on us. And it's like,
Okay.
it's so I feel like it's systematic. We not it's not, we it's not our fault, but at some point it is our fault.
I heard a quote, something along the lines of like, "What happens to you is not your fault, but then how you choose to deal with it afterwards is your responsibility." So something
Right.
on the same lines.
Yep.
I was going to talk to you about and you again, every time I get ready to say something, you kind of lead into it before I get to say it, about the cultural aspect, like the kind of the differences between, or maybe the way the kids you deal with need to be approached, as far as from our culture, versus how maybe an outside counselor would deal with them, or just anything about the cultural differences in what you do. If you could talk about that, I'd appreciate it.
The cultural differences between like the types of kids I'm dealing with versus like the Port Oranges and Ormonds or
Yes,
like
or yes, that would be fine. Anything that relates to culture, yeah.
well, I mean, like I said, those cities support their kids. You know, they don't have a problem having mentors step up. You know, they don't have a problem working together. Our culture does not is choosing to do that. You know, and it's kind of like they've said everybody says it, and I'm not from Daytona, but I feel like I am from Daytona because I've been here for so long.
Yeah.
But that crabs in a bucket kind of thing. You know, we got a
Yeah.
million restaurants, a million lawn care services, a million designers, but nobody's working together. Nobody's helping using their same resources. Everybody's trying to do it do it on their own. And it's too tough out here right now to do everything on your own.
Okay.
It's hard to kind of you can't become a big dog doing it on your own. Those
Okay.
big dogs didn't do it on their own. They did it together and grew from there. Because like for example, you see these airlines, the ones that are not willing to merge and conform, they're going out
Hmm.
of business.
Yeah.
But then you're seeing other ones that they join up together, and it doesn't matter whose name is on it; they're still alive. Now their planes are still being utilized, and their staff are still have jobs because they didn't care about my name and it's about me kind of thing.
All right.
You know, if it was another bigger mentoring program that was bigger than mine that can take the reins and we don't have to worry about the funding, and as long as my kids are being helped,
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be about my program.
I see.
Just like the boxing, I offloaded the boxing class that we have in my own gym
Uh-huh.
to go to Hagler's boxing gym. They do this full time. They
Okay.
have more trainers, so I don't have to be the trainer. They have a ring already. It's bigger. We can house more than 10, 15 kids.
Okay.
When I was doing it on my own, it was limited. And that wasn't my bread and butter. I'm not a full-time boxing coach.
Yeah.
So it was no problem for me to kind of merge with a team, a gym that's better in distance for a lot of my families because
Okay.
it's right on international. I
Hmm.
have more support and more help. I have more expertise, so it makes more sense for me to not have to keep pouring into rent for a couple of classes a day.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple of classes a week. It works mutually. So
Okay. I was familiar with the Hagler Gym. I did not know that you had that connection. I have students who go there. I didn't know that had that connection with them. That makes a lot of sense.
I guess I'm trying to show by example, that it can be done, and when it is done, that it's beneficial for both parties.
Now, speaking of that, one of the things I had a coworker that worked with you part time, and that's how I first even discovered who you were some years ago. And
Yeah.
one of the first things that Miss Mitchell, and one of the first things she said to me was that you combined the physical, the boxing, and the things like that, along with counseling and mental health and all of that, which I had not heard before. Can you talk about that connection between the physical and the exercise and stuff connected with the other things that you do?
I just feel like we have so many different types of kids that you got to connect with them in different ways. I love music, but I don't know how to. I mean, I know enough now because I've done it for so long. But that's where the music comes in. I had a kid that me talking to him about some of his depressive feelings and stuff like that. It brings him even more down. But then we go into the music studio and he's able to sing and let some of his emotions out and express himself. So now, that depression he's happier to do that. He's happy to let it out.
Uh,
So that's his way of expressing himself, not sitting here talking about it all day. You
okay.
know, and some of the other kids that it's like when we talk about some of their past and that trauma and stuff like that, they get angry. And of course, we're processing it. So they need to kind of do that. But then we also go next door and then hit on the boxing gym and do a little let him fight with me for a little bit and wrestle a little bit because that's kind of kind of really what he needs to kind of let loose. you
Okay.
know. So it's not saying that we don't address and process those things, but it's also an alternative that he gets a little bit 15 minutes in to let it out in his own way. Or a kid that does not does he doesn't have a dad, so me taking 10 minutes out of this session to go throw the football with him, we're still talking, or go play basketball, we're still talking while we're playing basketball. It's the same thing. We're just not sitting on a couch and I'm not sitting behind a desk talking to him about it.
Okay.
So it's you got to know your kids, you got to know what really their needs are, and what's going to best show progress. It's not about the cookie cutter. That's why they're just kind of like they do one thing and they just do it for it. No matter what kind of person you are, this is what they're gonna do, and this is their way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And the results in my eyes are not as good.
Okay. I see that. So finding those ways to connect, whether it's music, art, wrestling, whatever. I see that. Okay. But what is it that you would want people to know about either what you do or about the issues that you see that maybe I haven't brought up, but that are on your heart and mind?
Um, I just feel like people have to become more aware of what's really going on. They got to be more in tune, with themselves. They gotta. We have to do things together. We have to work together. It takes a village. It's not. They didn't. That saying hasn't been going on for forever for no reason. It literally does take a village. Back in the day, it was your parents, your grandparents, your cousins, your aunties, the neighbors. Everybody looked out for each other. And now it's like everybody for themselves, and it's kind of like a single mom, and she's just a single mom. She don't have no help, no, because everybody's struggling. I feel like so now it's hard for everybody else to kind of extend themselves, extending the hand because that hand they might not need. They might need that hand back, you know, later down the road. It feels like so.
Yeah.
And I've seen that times when it's like I've lended out, and this is separate, but it's like I've lended out money, and then now, let's say per se, I need it. That hand that I lent out is not always given back.
Okay.
So like I said, society has kind of made us that way. Um, but I feel like this is not the time to kind of give up on each other. This isn't the time to kind of seclude yourself from everybody else, because everybody's struggling from the top down. White, black, we're all struggling right now.
Yeah.
So it's like we kind of need each other more than not. And it's easier to, like I said, easier to do things together. And the people that don't evolve, the people that don't adjust, even with AI, like if you're not using it
Yeah.
and you're wondering why these other people are coming out with flyers and doing all these new things and they passing you by because
Yeah.
they've adjusted. They've learned with the curve. My mom is 75, 76 years old. She knows how to, use AI and do emojis and it's like if those people you gotta evolve. You gotta evolve or you're gonna get left behind for sure.
Um, uh, two more questions, I guess. One, could you give us, I know some personally, just from some kids, but maybe could you share a couple of success stories of course, no names, but couple of stories of some of the kids you've dealt with and changes that you've seen in them?
I got those for days, but it's like to be honest, I just use all of those kids that I just saw graduated. Um like I said, I deal with at-risk youth, so majority of the kids that I deal with, people are not expecting them to excel. They're not expecting them to do well and graduate. These are kids, not all of them, but some of them are in the have IEPs or taking medications or
Mm-hmm.
single parents and low income. So, they're not expected to kind of do the things that they're doing right now. So just being able to see them, you know, go across that stage, see them taking some of those ideas and stuff and going doing a trade, go into entrepreneurship, coming up with these business ideas. I'm not saying it was all because of me, but I know that when I first met them, they was not thinking like that.
Right.
They didn't even have that even idea. To be honest, even like our financial literacy summer program, and when we go on field trips and go to different colleges, in most cases, those kids go to the colleges that we take them to. They're
Okay.
not going on them colleges tours on their own.
Okay.
So they're not going in these different places and being exposed to them on their own. not that they can't, but they don't even know that that's opportunity,
Yeah.
you know. So when I say exposing them to different things, we went. It was a one spring break that me and Primrose from Sistersville. We went to Miami,
Hmm.
and we went to some of the colleges down there. Some of those kids from that group went down to Miami because they got a chance to see that. They got the chance to see what it's like down there. And I was like, well, that's better than Daytona. I want to go down there. You know, for the kids that we went to into Jacksonville. Or even the kids here, you know, in Daytona State, and they're not leaving because they see that there's an opportunity right here in town. I don't have a lot of money to go far, and that, you know, they have that fear of that anyway,
Yeah.
you know, but it's a lot of opportunities right here in town that they can kind of look into.
That's perfect. That is the perfect testimonial. The last thing here is my timer's up. How do people get in contact with you? How do they get their kids to you? What's the process? What happens?
Go to our website, number one, you know, www.mrandmissmentoring, and it's MS. A lot of people still put MRS, like
I
it's
know.
me and my wife. It has nothing to do with her. It's about the kids. So, Mr. and Miss Mentoring.org. Of course, my phone number 386 999 0333. Other phone number 386 Of course, social media is Facebook, Instagram. You know, they can do some research. They got to find us. You know,
Got it.
I feel like when they're in need, they got to find. They look.
No, I get it. I get it. The hungry man will go find the food. I get it.
So
Mr. Collins, thank you